Yeah, so today I want to show you, and I'm going to show the relationship diagram that I picked up last week. I showed this as well. So last week's discussion again was, here's a project, and let me fill that sheet I just showed you with expense sheets related to the project, right? So it was it was a one-to-many here, right? Projects to expense sheets. So, but today what I want to do is I want to show you, okay, we were just generating one expense sheet, right? Now, today we're going to go, okay, I have projects, right? And my projects have multiple people assigned to it. So here's on my project employees table. And with that, each employee has an expense sheet, right? So we're going to go from the project and generate an expense sheet per each employee. Okay, so basically it's going to go, for every related employee record, generate an expense sheet for all of them and store them at the project employee level. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to show today. All right, so let me pull up. The test record, right? The project record. One thing I want to point out. So here last week I clicked this button basically, and we looked at the code, and it generated an expense sheet for all this data. So down below here on the same project record, I'm showing you then the employee records, the related employees to the project. So all these employees are on the project, and they have expense sheets for each one of them. And we want to basically click a button and generate per each employee an expense sheet, right? And so let me now what's different, okay, between this, what we did here, and what we're going to do here with this green button, involves a document template change, and I'm going to show that in a second, and then some changes to our formula URL code behind the button. All right, and we're going to go into detail on that. So let me show you the document template record. I know I said again that I might refer to it, and I'm going to, just not in huge detail, right? So we went over this last week. It's in the recording. So this is the document template record for the projects, and for the project generate an expense sheet, right? So that's what we did. We went over this last week, and so now the new template. So I had to just adjust this just a little bit. So I had to create a new template record for what we want to do now, which is generate at the project level, still generate for all my employees an expense sheet for everyone. All right. So if I'm pulling up the next template here, so you can kind of, I'm going to point out the difference. So the only difference here is the fact that now the master table is called project employees, because we want to generate per each project employee an expense sheet. And then that DBID has to go in right here. So if we look back at the template from last week, which is right here, projects, and here's the master table. The only change again, the only change here at this level is, again, the master table is now project employees. The only change at the subtable level down here is the fact that in this subtable record, right, where we're going to pull all the actual expense sheet data related to the project. The only change, and I'll show it right here, is the query, right? Because I have a different table, different relationships. So on the expense table, field 18 was a related project, and on the expense sheet table for project employees, it's the related project employee is field 19. So that's really the only changes I had to do to do a batch, if you will, of all my project employees and expense sheet for everyone, generate an expense sheet for everyone. All right, so that's from from a template perspective. Now I'm going to take you through. I believe last week we may have gone through the formula URL for the button that I clicked. I believe we did. If not, we're going to go through it in more detail anyway right now, because it's of importance now. So that was last week's button code. All right, and this week's button code is right here. And so I have some comments in here. So because we're gonna utilize these other parameters in a little bit. But what we're going to do here for creating our project employee expense sheets, there was a couple of changes, right? So we're running this from the project, but we're going to be pointing at the project employees table, right? And so that's the DBID parameter, right, in the formula URL code, right? And all of these, by the way, are all listed out in the help. So if I'm skimming over like app ID, we don't really necessarily have to go through what these mean. The template DBID is here. So, but I'm just going to point out the main things that would change. So the DBID for the project employees table goes here on line 4. Now line 6 is that template, that new template record that I showed you. I was just showing you the document template ID. Record ID is 36. And then the only other change is this MS query, because in the prior formula URL code, there was a parameter called MSID, because we were just going straight from the project record and we were going to get all the related expense records, right? But here we're saying for the project employees table, query it using the related field with the record ID from the project. So get me all project employee records for this project. Essentially, that's what this is doing, this query. Okay, so, and let me keep this up, and let me bring up, I'm going to bring up again, just so we see it, and again, I'm going to bring up the button from last week, again, the project to expense sheet, right? So, I'm going to, let me get rid of these lines. These don't have to be comments here. Okay. So this is the project to expense sheet code. And if you look, everything is basically the same, except for the template ID and actually, and the DBID, right? Because we're running that against the project instead of project employees table. Template ID again was 17. And then line 8 says MSID. So we're with the MSID, we're saying we just want to use this one record, just create an expense sheet for this project, right? Whereas in our other button code for project employee expense sheets, we want to say, give me all the get me all the project employees related to this specific project. And oh, by the way, store it in a file, store it in the field. These are the fields that on the project employees table, the file attachment ID 62, and then a date. All right, so those are also fields on the project employees table that would have to change here too, just to make sure you store it in the proper location. All right, so I will run this code. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So we're just going to run it, and it's going to, and so we're generating it from the project, and we're just going to go right to that project employees table and start generating all of the expense sheets for all my related employees. And so here it's telling me 5 documents were generated. So there's 5 employees, as you can see down below. If I close this and refresh, we're going to see the change to the. So here 219, it generated expense sheets for everyone here, and then so all these were just generated, and we can have a look at them. So here each one of these has the detail related strictly to that particular employee. Oops, so here's one right here. So this is for Joseph Wallace, right? Close these, and then we have one here for Evelyn, all right? So all her specific expense records are in the sheet. Okay, so that's so pretty handy. You can generate all these records, but one button click, generate all the expense sheets for every employee related to the project. So that's one scenario with creating multiple, with processing multiple records and creating multiple documents. Now, I'm going to go back into the button code for this, what I just ran, right? And now we say, okay, that was great. We generated all those documents, no problem. But I want to, we have other options that go along with multi-record processing, and I want to sort of bring that in, meaning merge. So now that you created them all, and they will get stored at the lowest level, the project or the lower level, the project employee level. How about we also create one at the project level as a consolidated file, and that's done with a process we call merging. So merge all the documents that were just generated and store them up at the project level. Okay, so these are the other parameters that I'm going to introduce into the code. Now everything else stays the same. So we still running off the project employees, this template ID, the file name staying the same. We're still querying and grabbing all the records. But now we're going to merge. We're going to say merge to this table, our current table, DBID. Merge and put the file attachment or the file after it's generated into field 242 and store it on this specific record. So that's what the merge rid is. Give me the record ID of the record where you want me to store this thing. I'm going to stay on the project, And then give me a file name, all project employee expense sheets. And then also give me a date and timestamp. Field 243. So I just introduced those into the button code. I'm going to save this. And now when we run, we should see it update the date and put in a merged file. So I'm going to just run this. And it's still creating all the documents at the lower level, the project employee level. But now it's taking them all and merging them together as well. So it's generating and merging. It's going to create one PDF of everything. Hopefully. I didn't get that wrong. I think I got the code right. Hello.
It's definitely thinking.
Yeah. Well, worst case, I had run it earlier to make sure it does work. So I'll just bring that up if this doesn't cooperate. All right, since I have run it before, I'm going to pull up that merged file. So go away. Oh, it's still there. Okay. All right. So here is the actual file itself. Let me pull it open. So this is now. So we generated all the files for all the project-related employees, and now we're going, okay, it's great you created them all, but I need them all in one file so I can print them out or whatever. So this is going to be, again, this is Joseph Wallace, Edward Thompson, Evelyn Morales. So it's all their specific sheets in one. I can print it and do whatever I need to do, email it, etc. Right? So that's that. You see if that ever came back. Oh yeah, it did come back. Oh, there it goes. Oh, the operation time, that great. All right, so let me see. Yeah, it did create it. It is here.
And Todd, would that be a good example of one that would use progress bar? Then you at least be able to see that it's still loading.
Yeah, well, that form does, there isn't really a progress bar on that form in particular, the loading panel form. But yeah, we can probably introduce one into that. So it did create, it should be here. It is right here, 223. And now what I want to do, hopefully it's going to cooperate. Now that I showed that. So again, that's just another option. So obviously the first option was just generate all the documents. Second option was, okay, now that you generate them all, keep doing that, but merge them all together so I have a copy of them. And then this last option is, well, I don't want to merge them. I'm not going to merge them, but I want you to put them all, we can put them all in the same workbook. So there's some down here I'm going to use. And I grouped the comments in the code to show the different, the different sections of what we're trying to do here. Obviously, everything up the top stays the same, but down here we're going, place all the documents in one spreadsheet. So we can put it all in what's called the same workbook. So same workbook equals Y. Where we're going to store this, what field ID we're going to store it. So on the project record, and this is where we're going to store it. And this is what the record ID of where to store it, the current record. So let's run that. Hopefully it's going to cooperate a little bit better than that last transaction. So, okay, so now we're going to run. So it's not going to merge. It'll just consolidate them all into one spreadsheet. Okay, there. That was a lot quicker. All right. So now I just that should be right here. That's the one we just created. So let's look at, so this spreadsheet now. All right, I'll bring it over to the other screen. So this spreadsheet now, instead of the one PDF, it's same workbook. So put all my records in one Excel, tab by tab by tab. So that's, same workbook, and now I have them in an Excel sheet, which I guess would be handy. Again, depends on your use case. Okay, so those are those various options for multiple record processing and different options for merging and for storing in the same workbook, etc. There was one thing I want to go back to. There was a question last week. By the way, I'm not done with batch processing. I have one more option I want to show you, but there was a question last week I just remembered, and I want to kind of go back to that. I'm not sure who asked the question, but I think it's pretty important. It was basically basically dumping down multiple records into a spreadsheet. And so let me show you what I mean. I'm going to run it. So I'm going to say create Excel from report name. So I'm going to create this Excel sheet. And this is really going to be a dump of records from my customers table. So here it is, right? So this is a dump of records from my actually it's from my opportunities table. So these are all became active customers, right? So I'm just showing all the different active opportunities that converted to active accounts, right? So that's what this is showing, right? But the cool thing and again, this is multiple records coming from one table. The nice thing about this way that this gets generated, and it was related to a question last week, and I didn't completely answer it, and I wanted to just kind of go back to an option that you can do with what I just showed you. So all I did to generate that particular sheet was I added a document template record, right, with basically nothing in it. I mean, I just said report query for active opportunities, and I added the sheet. And this sheet is essentially, it's right here. So this is a sheet with a header. That's about it. Just a header, one tab. And the query, so that's all I needed for the document template record, right? Then I added a subtable Excel record, right? And if we look at this, this is pretty basic in that, we're giving it the DBID of the opportunities, the opportunities table, and then we're giving it a C list to say, and put the values in these different columns. But the cool thing was, we can just use a query, and this can be standard query syntax that Quickbase has that we went over last week. But I wanted to show you the fact that you could also type in a report name, right? And that's all it's doing. It's going, there's a report under my opportunities table called active opportunities, okay? And that lists out three opportunities that converted from leads, right? I don't know what the status is, but they're active. And we're just taking that report, right? And that report name and just dumping it right into the query. So you don't necessarily have to use query syntax for Quickbase. Now, granted, this doesn't really allow you to drive it via variables, relationship, master detail type scenarios, which we went over last week. But, this can be very handy, right, Matthew? I know Matthew was like, this is something we should show because it's pretty handy. And it was sort of related to what we spoke about last week. So,
Yep.
But everything else is basic in here. Again, the DBID of the table and the C list to show what the columns. We're doing some subtotaling, inserting new rows. I'm putting it on a sheet one, group things. That's what I showed with that. Made it a little more fancier with what I just showed you. But obviously none of that is required. But you could simply dump data down using reports. So I just wanted to show that as well. And now one more option for batch processing that, what the example I showed before, project employees, expense sheets, that works fine, but we cap that kind of processing at 50 records, right? So because these are web-based processes and they can't run forever, right? So there's another option that we have to run batch, and this gets installed automatically into your apps when you install quick Excel docs. And so there's these tables get installed automatically, Excel docs batch processing, and then Excel docs batch processing logs. So this will actually log the runs every time you click the button. And so if we look at this record, okay, so, and this is unlike what I showed you before where I was on a project record. This is a table that is on its own, completely independent, and we're gonna define in what's called Excel docs batch processing arguments field. We're gonna define all the variables that will drive how and where to generate the batch of documents, if you will. Okay, so I want to take you through the arguments because it's important. So again, this is a strictly independent table, but we're going to use it. It could be reporting, it could be Excel docs reporting, it could be whatever you want. I mean, and again, and this is the batch processing table, and hanging off of this is your batch processing logs table, which will catalog every time you run it, how many documents were processed, how long did it run, etc. So the most important part of this, besides the document template that drives this, which I can go into quickly, but I wanted to show you the parameters, right? So very similar to the button code, the formula URL button code that we just saw, but it gets laid out a little differently because this is not a formula URL, it's just a text field. So we're going to pump parameters, just like this, into a batch process, right, via an email notification. And I can show you the email notification in a second. But, essentially it's all the options that, are in the regular button code, app DBIDs, so, in this example, we're going to say, we're going to go off the projects table, right? We're going to generate a project sheet, time sheet, expenses. So I'll show you. It's actually, this is the template. It's somewhat involved. It's kind of cool actually, but this is the template that the batch process will generate. And it's going to list out all the employees and hours and then calculate equipment as a subtable here for equipment. So it'll do a whole bunch. It's going to populate over here. It's going to populate all time entry here, expense sheets here, expense data here, and equipment data here. So, and then it'll pop in some other summary fields as well. In order to generate that, we just have to give it some parameters, and so we're going to run it for every project, right? Again, template 16, and we'll show 16 in a second. The query says, 3 is greater than 0. It basically says, give me every project. I want to generate the batch. I want to run this batch for every project record. So that's why this query is like this. So certainly you can make whatever query parameters and syntax you would like. And you can also use a report ID, right? We spoke about that last week. This could be MS query equals 5 if you wanted to. File attachment ID, again, that's the project table, etc. Now, there's some other parameters here. Actually, let me pop down to line 17. We already saw these before, merging. So as part of this whole batch generation, I'd like to have the file stored right on my batch processing table. So send it some merge parameters, current table, current real record ID. Here's the file attachment, merge FA 14, and name it this, right? And here's the date, time. And then right in the middle here, line 12 to line 16 says, these are the batch, XLDB. So this is batch processing for Excel docs. Says, what table are we running from? What's the record ID we're running from, right? The current record, right? The batch processing record. This XLDT field says, where do you want me to store the processing information, like the message that says, the error message or the processing message says, hey, this process has just been kicked off. We do that, and I'm going to show you that in the table in a second. So that's what this is used for. XLDB, the batch processing, where are we going to run from? The current table, right? So this is the current RID, current table. Here's the FID for the message, and then here's a log table. So by the way, I want to store the log every time it runs. I'd like to log the run, and that's what this is. All right, so pretty straightforward. Again, a lot of these parameters are what you would do normally behind a regular button click, right? Except we add some batch processing and some merging to make it a little bit more rich in the way it processes. So now, when I click this button, it will change. You will see. So it's going to send this set of parameters via an email notification to our batch processor, which sits on a server in the cloud. All right. So if I click this, it sets off the process, and here's that XLDB TFLD field right here, field 8, which says, oh, the batch process executed, started. Right. We can click refresh. We have a refresh button, and it'll show when it completes. And it completed it, and it goes and updates that trigger field again, that what we call the trigger field, which is like, okay, process is complete, etc. It logged a record in the log table to say, yeah, I processed 3 records, and this is when we did it. And then here is my merge file. So I kicked it off, processed everything, built all the docs, and now I want to see them. And they're also stored at every project record, as we saw before with project employees. But here's what it generated, which is kind of cool. There's a lot going on in this, which is neat. You know, there's our expenses, by the way. So here's the project, right? And then it's showing all the expenses on the project per each employee that's related to the project, and then a bunch of like equipment that was used on the project. You know, that's for one project. And here's the other project, Quickbase project, you know, and again, all the related info, different tables of information that we set up in the document template record to generate this. Here's another one. Here's the third project, Excel docs test. You know, all again, time entry and expense data, equipment, etc. And then it actually even gives us some summarization on the template also. So that and you know, let me just the template itself is somewhat involved, but you know, we've seen how to set these up before. So you know, it's project summary, you know, it's the project's table. Here's the template, which we just looked at. And then here's all the queries that helps fill that template, you know. So there's some cool stuff that goes on in this, and maybe in a future session, we can actually go through some of the details on how to generate that, because it's actually a pretty neat document. And you know, let me just show you one last thing, just the email notification that kicks off. So when I click this execute button, which is really just a formula URL, you know, all this does is it just updates a field. It updates our field 8, right, with batch execution requested, right? And then it redirects back to the record. But by virtue of the edit record, right, we're updating a field, right? It kicks off an email notification, which is set up under this record, under this table. And here it is. So Excel docs batch request. And again, all this is set up in help. And all we're doing is we're notifying our process, right, via an email. And we're sending the batch logs, which we just went through. We're sending, and that's as simple as the email notification needs to be. Very straightforward. It has a filter here so that we don't have, so the button, so it doesn't get sent multiple times. When we kick it off, we don't want to, you know, kick off the notification again. So we're just kind of letting that process.